And here we are in the Tools panel. Let's jump right in. Select an editable poly object, and we're going to talk about the backface and seams button. These are reference buttons that will collect information when the object is loaded into the system. So we have the object here. We're going to load it by clicking the preview button, which is the preview image panel. Okay. Now that we have it loaded, we've referenced this unwrap modifier for information about the backface setting and the seam setting. Okay. So as an example, I can turn off backface, and you can see it turning on and off here in the rollout as well. And we don't have to go into the polygon modifier to get to it with SSUV, but you do when you go into the regular rollout. And that's perfectly fine. That's just how that works. Now, with the seam setting, we can left click and toggle through various states. Okay. But that does not update the rollout here for the unwrap modifier. However, if we do turn this off, let's go down to turn off, and we load this again, we load the object back into the system, we see that the seam settings are turned off, even though they are displayed here. So we can turn those off and back on to reset that. It is a little different. I suppose I should work on fixing this and making sure these get checked off and changed when I change this, but I didn't think of doing that until now. I apologize for not noticing that. So if I left click, I cycle through the different seam types, and if I right click, I see thin and thick, right? I'd like to keep it on the thicker seam because it is easier to see in the viewport. All right then. Same with backface, we can turn that off, select another object, load that object into the system where we see backface is on, and if I select this object and load it into the system, backface is off. Once again, that's modifier-based referencing. Okay, so even if we had channel 2 over here, okay, you can see backface is turned on. If I go back to my channel 1, we can see it's channel 1 and backface is turned off. Okay, modifier specific. Let's do this and bring these back to editable polys. Next, we have UVWX form with the left click. Okay, and you can't see that in the viewport. We'll change that in a moment. And with the right click, we get the X form modifier added. I'm going to collapse this back down and turn on the checker override. Now that we are in here, we're going to add the UVWX form once again and change it. You can see that. Okay, we're going to get there sooner or later. There we go. You can see that we can change the information here, and that's based upon what we have selected. So let's go into the editable poly, select polygon. We're going to select all, go back to the UVWX form, and adjust as we like. You change your settings, or do it through your modifier, or however you prefer doing that. But there's the feature. You can have two objects, and if you right click, you will receive a an X form modifier, but it won't display until you select a single object. Okay, so we're going to collapse those back down to editable polys. I'm going to left click, and we will receive an instanced UVWX form. Okay, and if we take a look here, we can actually go into the editable poly here, select all of these, come back out into the instanced modifier, and there we go. Let's collapse that. Next, we have freeze. Select one object. I'm going to, I still have the modifier, so let's collapse that. Load it into the system. I'm going to go into polygon mode, select all, and I will just click box map for a quick result here. Okay. I'm going to select this by double clicking. That is one element. Now, if I left click, I'm going to freeze it, and you'll see freeze used. To unfreeze, right click the same button. I'm going to right click to unfreeze. Well, what did any of that really do? Okay, so let's do that again. I'm going to left click to freeze it, and now I'm going to try to select it by Control A. Okay, I didn't do that right. Now we're frozen. There we go. So you can't select it once it is frozen. It's like a mask in a way. Okay. So let's do that with the top because I kind of muddied through that. And you can see I can't select that. But once I right click, it will melt. Fire has melted the frozen pieces. We can do a Control A and see I can select those once again. Next we have the Bake button. Once I left click on that, we can receive a pop-up menu system for Bake to Texture dialog, Render to Texture, Render Surface Map, and Environment. Okay. I'm not going to go through each of those. Those are default Max tools. Next is UV Seam. What we'll do here is load this into the system again. Turn off the overrides. Now, if I would like to select an element edge here, I can right-click to open this. Editor here. And you'll see if I double-click an edge, that will give me... Move this over for a bit. Make it clearer. If I double-click the edge here, I receive this perimeter, but I don't get these other green edges here, these other seams. I would like to select that seam. So what I can do is select one seam on that element, then left-click. They'll automatically select the seams for me. If I would like to select all of the seams for my entire selection set, I would select no seams at all. And yes, you have to be in edge mode for this. I should have mentioned that. My apology. So be in edge mode, have no seams selected, then click UV Seam. Now this is going to take a moment here because we have to crawl through the object and find the information. Now you can see that all of the seams have been selected. If I can get it to select there. There we go. Wonderful. Next we have Element to Smoothing Group. Let's close out the editor. Going to go into this mode. You see that we have all of these elements here. Oh, let's do this. I have to get that back there. So pack. Wonderful. And we will... Okay, so we have the box elements already set as smoothing groups, so I need to change the selection set here. Let's load that into the system. Turn off back facing, select the top half, and I'm going to right click. There we go. It gives me a better selection to work with for you. So you can see that there's smoothing groups that are already here, but we're not utilizing those for the top part of the sphere. At this point, I'm going to left click, and you'll see it says shift required. It's a safety measure. So shift left click. Then we end up processing the object here. And you can see that the smoothing groups for the top of the sphere have been changed. And here's what it looked like before. You can see clearly that there was a different smoothing group on top. And there we are. Okay. I'm going to collapse that, load it back into the system. Next, we have Element to Material ID. So I'm going to turn on the User Custom Material ID override, which is different from the Max default system override. We're going to left click that. Material needs to be created before it can be assigned. So let's do this. Select the object, add a material. And there we go. Okay, so we have an object here with, I believe it's material number 2, material ID number 2. And we're going to have more material IDs after this because we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 elements. So I'm going to shift, left click, and there we go. We have material IDs per element. Okay. Next is pelt seams. This is a little different. Let's turn this off and get rid of that. Let's use this auto unfold real quick. We have to load the object into the system. Going to select all and create a UV blob here, and then use auto unfold 3D. And I believe I have to press shift to make that work. Some of these require shift to work because it's a failsafe. Okay, so there we are with the object. And there we are with the peel/pelt seam. Now, if I'd like to add or expand the seam, I can select more edges, and then left click. You see it will add those edges as seams. Okay. Now, if I want to remove all of the seams, which is usually what I do because I prefer not to work with pelt seams most of the time, I just deselect every edge. So you can see this by my example here. I have all of those edges selected, but if I just click and drag off of the object, no edges are selected. Okay. At this point, I can right click. That will remove all of the pelt seams instantly. So let's put some pelt seams back on there because I would like to show you the replacement pelt seam method. If I left click to add that seam as a peel pelt seam, I can now, double click here, and instead of removing them with right click, I'm actually going to be replacing them. So it will remove all of the existing pelt seams and then create new pelt seams. Okay. And once again, I can just select off with no edges selected and right click to clear the pelt seams. Sure, that is a little weird of an approach, but it's there if it's something that vibes with you, right? Next, we have Vertex Paint. Vertex Paint modifier can be added by shift and left click. And there we are. We'll take the paintbrush and make a few strokes there. Turn that red. Make a few strokes there. Green, and do the same thing. I'm going to close that out. Right click to stop the painting. And now we have the Vertex Paint modifier here, but we're not seeing the Vertex painting in the viewport. Okay, so we can toggle that by right clicking the Vertex Paint button. That will turn on the visibility mode. But if we shift right click, it will go from illuminated to shaded. I tend to prefer to keep it in the shaded mode, but maybe I would work in both. And then if I control left click, we can cycle through the different view types. And you can see the info bar section providing us information on which view type is being used. The viewport mode is currently set to color with shaded false. Viewport is true. Let's see. Left click again with control. That's soft select. That's color plus illumination. That's alpha. That's illumination with shaded false. And this is color with shaded false. I will now right click with shift and get shaded true. So we're color shaded true. So if I right click the button again, I can turn off that preview mode and we're back to normal. Okay. So these buttons might take a little time to get used to, I should say, because of their multifunctionality to it. Now, this button currently does not have a tooltip that is descriptive. So you can see these other ones will explain exactly. So hopefully I'll go through these buttons and fix this up before first beta release. Okay. But just in case I don't know that it will be in the second or third beta release where I fix these things. Okay. So what we have next is the instance modifier button. And we can check this by making a few objects. I'm just going to keep them in a little pattern here. I'm going to select all of them and Shift D, which is my hotkey to go to editable poly, to collapse objects to that. You see each one is an editable poly. I'm going to select all 4 objects. You can see that. And with that, I will now right click to add an instanced modifier for the unwrap, right? And we'll make this a little prettier real quick. Okay, so there we go. Shift and left click allowed me to map that instance modifier and pack everything according to the settings. So let's continue on. If I have one object selected with an instanced modifier, and I render that UV preview by loading the object into the system, I can think to myself, well, where are those other objects? What other objects have that instance modifier? Well, what I have to do is have the modifier selected with the object, of course. and then left click, and that will find the other objects for me. Okay. Next we have user stack. I'm going to actually open up the editor to show you the example here. And let me actually just grab one object and then we'll open that back up. Okay. So this is interesting because if you're making a plant or you need to stack objects in the exact place, it's somewhat similar to how trim gem functions. Let's just walk through this, okay? Let's turn on checker override. Turn off that. I'm going to rotate this so that we have it in place and place it in the, well, we'll just leave it where it's placed. That's perfectly fine. So what this does is this allows me to set a region by clicking. So I can left click and it sets the UV space for what I'll be doing next. That UV space is the minimum and maximum of this selection. So it's not where this top corner is and this top corner is, but it's pretty close to where that is. It's actually where it would have its most left vert, most top vert, most right vert, most bottom vert. You get the idea. Okay. So now that the coordinates have been set by left clicking to define that space, I can then select other elements. Okay. And right click. That will place those elements onto that location. Now let me give you an example here. If the object or the element, is bigger and I right click to place it there, it is going to just stack it on that location based upon center points. Okay. But if we would like to conform this to that minimum and maximum that we predetermined already, what we can do is shift and right click, and that will force it into that space. Okay. So I can take all of these elements and shift right click, and there we are. Everything is stacked on top of one another and it is conformed to that minimum maximum space we defined with that first selection element. Okay. Filter. Let's lay this out with a pack. Going to minimize. Let's actually get rid of that. Going to select these faces here. I see I have some inverted faces, which is strange. It's not normal. Okay. So if you ever see inverted faces, or inverted elements, I should say, you can just right click and SSUV will crawl through your object and try to fix everything for you. Okay. Well, I just realized that we're at 18 minutes and we've done these first 12 buttons. So let's stop this video here and then we'll go to filter in the next one.